No, but we have a congressional act now to requiring the release, but they're going to say, you know what?
Subject to
Tom Hanks,
redaction.
it's unfair that he was mentioned
And
because
the
he
law
was eating
says subject
Skittles.
to redaction. Subject to redaction.
And we all know what that means. That's to protect.
That's why I'm saying you will never be satisfied with what's released.
Shocking new Epstein leaks have just dropped. Unseen footage from his infamous island. And guess who's front and center? Not as a guest, but allegedly as one of his twisted party favors. Paris Hilton. The footage, circulating through encrypted forums and already flagged by congressional aides as part of the wider Epstein file dump, shows a teenage Hilton mingling among faces long tied to Epstein's empire of secrecy. For years, her name floated through whispers and documentaries, dismissed as tabloid exaggeration. But now, with images surfacing that appear to place her not just in proximity, but at the center of the island's darker scenes, the narrative has shifted overnight. This isn't recycled gossip. It's moving evidence that has fans outraged and Paris scrambling to shut it down.
Again, there was new names in some of the emails that I think investigators need to look at. In particular, I jumped on the name of a modeling agent who, in a similar fashion to Jean-Luc Brunel, who brought underage girls from overseas to Jeffrey Epstein for abuse. There was another man. What was interesting about this other individual is that he also apparently provided young models for Donald Trump's modeling agency.
The footage arrives as Washington drowns in more than 20,000 pages of Epstein emails, schedules, and logs released by the House Oversight Committee this month. Among the endless exchanges, a few stand out. Epstein referring to Donald Trump as "that dog that hasn't barked," mentions of Virginia Giuffre, and messages hinting that several well-known young stars were brought into his orbit by Ghislaine Maxwell. That detail is now exploding online because Maxwell, according to multiple witnesses, once tried to recruit Paris Hilton at a Manhattan party in 2000, years before Epstein's first conviction. Back then, Hilton was barely out of her teens, a rising name in fashion, and exactly the type Epstein's circle was said to target. Paris has denied ever knowing Maxwell, telling The Times this year, "I don't even remember ever meeting her. I'm such a good clickbait name." But a photo from that same period, Hilton beside Maxwell and Donald Trump at the Anand John fashion show in New York, has resurfaced with new intensity. We can now see it in a different light, knowing Epstein's inner circle was already under quiet investigation for their recruiting patterns. 5 years after that photo, Epstein would take a plea deal, admitting to solicitation involving someone under 18 and serving just 13 months in what prosecutors later called a sweetheart arrangement.
Her, doesn't it? She probably wants to get out early. So I think that we have more digging to do. I think the DOJ transparency effort here is the right thing, but the reason it's on a Friday, Will, is I think there are no smoking guns. There's other places we have to look.
Well, Buck, you appropriately...
And now, 2 decades later, the same network that once shielded him is cracking open, dragging everyone caught in its gravity, including Paris Hilton, back into the storm. Insiders claim the newly released footage isn't the only connection linking her to Epstein's orbit. Investigators reviewing Maxwell's communications say multiple names tied to early 2000s fashion parties, publicists, scouts, photographers, repeatedly appear in the emails of Epstein's assistants Sarah Kellen and Nadia Marchenko, also known as Nadia Marinova, both listed as unindicted co-conspirators. Hilton's name surfaces again, allegedly referenced as someone GM wanted for Jeffrey, shorthand prosecutors confirmed Maxwell often used. It's a chilling echo of Christopher Mason's account in the 2020 docuseries, where Maxwell reportedly saw Paris across a room and said she'd be perfect for Jeffrey. What makes this new chapter explosive is the timing.
I think these things like Epstein, and there's probably a bunch of other similar operations that are being run, they provide you with like a really good time, or maybe you're a high profile, extremely wealthy individual, and it's hard for you to get hosed. And some guy tells you, hey, we've got everything covered. You know, you come to my island, nothing, you know, what happens on the island stays on the island.
The leaks dropped just days before the House vote on whether to release the full Epstein files. Donald Trump, now facing renewed scrutiny for his old friendship with Epstein, dismissed the documents as a Democrat hoax. But within the emails, Epstein himself described Trump as borderline insane and bragged about knowing how dirty Donald is. Buried in the same threads are references to young stars introduced by GM, a phrase analysts now believe may include Hilton. The possibility that her name could appear in the redacted sections of Epstein's records has triggered a social media frenzy, with hashtags pairing her image alongside the phrase, "the forgotten recruit." We've seen this pattern before. A celebrity, once viewed as a carefree socialite, suddenly recast as collateral in a power game involving billionaires, politicians, and blackmail schemes. Paris Hilton's rise from club royalty to reality TV icon was fast, glamorous, and, some say, suspiciously insulated behind the flashbulbs. Former associates recall her disappearing from events for private meetings arranged by figures later linked to Epstein's circuit. None of this was provable before, but with visuals now showing her interacting with known procurers on the island, speculation has crossed into confrontation.
Stephanie, there have also been more cases filed in court with those accusers attempting to go after potential co-conspirators.
That's exactly right, Whit. 2 more women are suing Epstein's estate. They say they were recruited by an unnamed Epstein employee. Now, this is in addition to the lawsuit filed against Epstein's longtime friend, Ghislaine Maxwell, who is also accused of recruiting for him. Maxwell denied.
Her team has refused to comment beyond repeating that she was never part of Epstein's world. Meanwhile, victims' attorneys point to a broader pattern: famous names protecting other famous names. The Department of Justice insists no client list exists, yet survivors are building their own database from partial documents and leaks. Among the redacted entries, one label marked PH has drawn attention. Sources close to the committee claim that this line could match Paris Hilton's initials, as well as her alleged appearance in archived flight logs. If confirmed, it would suggest she visited Epstein properties more than once, far beyond the 2000 fashion show photo that sparked earlier speculation. What fans are reacting to now isn't just the footage, it's the emotional contradiction.
Knew that they were underage. How do you just have this be so one-sided? It is, I mean, it's such a miscarriage of justice. This is not what justice is supposed to look like. It's just, it's incredibly disappointing.
We've watched Paris Hilton publicly reclaim her trauma in documentaries, speaking openly about being exploited and silenced as a young woman. But online discourse has twisted that confession into a question. Was she a victim, a participant, or both? Some former insiders suggest her later connections in nightlife and modeling gave her a kind of power that mirrored Ghislaine Maxwell's, describing her as someone who knew the system from the inside. That vague but haunting phrase keeps resurfacing in fan theories, framing Hilton not only as someone harmed by Epstein's circle, but as a figure who might have learned its rules. The deeper analysts dig, the more the lines blur. In Epstein's recently unsealed communications with author Michael Wolff, he jokes about girls who became recruiters themselves, and the timeline aligns eerily with Hilton's rise to early 2000s fame. Even if that reference wasn't about her, the coincidence is enough to fuel the rumor. Investigators tracing social networks between Epstein, Maxwell, and celebrity culture point out that Hilton's party photos from that era include overlapping guests with known Epstein associates, from fashion moguls to modeling agents later investigated for trafficking. The suggestion isn't that Paris led anything, but that she moved in the same circles, perhaps unaware, or perhaps not. In her latest interviews, Hilton insists she was targeted, not involved.
It's layers upon layers. It's those Russian nesting dolls, and you open it, and there's another one in there, and you open, there's another one in there.
Corruptions at all time, bro. The Epstein files.
I heard there's no files. I heard it's a hoax. And then all of a sudden, he's going to release the files. Well, I thought there was no files.
Man.
He wants an investigation now.
Yet the irony of her claim, "I'm such a good clickbait name," rings louder now, as that very name anchors a new wave of scandal. The footage may not prove wrongdoing, but it cements association. And in the court of public perception, that's all it takes. The internet doesn't wait for verdicts, it builds them. With the island clip spreading faster than fact-checkers can respond, Paris Hilton has become both symbol and suspect in a case that refuses to stay buried. What we're watching is more than a single celebrity crisis. It's the collision of entertainment myth and political power. Epstein's files continue to ripple through every layer of influence, from Congress to Beverly Hills. And as committees battle over what to release next, whispers grow louder about additional footage showing recognizable faces interacting with known fixers. Some say one of those tapes includes the same 3 people seen at that 2000 fashion show. If that's true, and if this leak is only the beginning, we may be witnessing the moment the entire facade begins to crack. Now that the island footage has Paris back in the spotlight, the curtain is lifting on the people who allegedly brought her into Epstein's orbit. Those names, the quiet fixers, the recruiters, the handlers, are resurfacing right as the public begins connecting the dots between Paris, Ghislaine Maxwell, and the powerful men who always seemed to hover nearby. Sources tied to congressional investigators say the footage aligns with survivor testimony, describing celebrity baiting, where recognizable faces were used to make private gatherings appear glamorous and safe.
Interview is and never was part of the Epstein files. She was sentenced in 2025. This was an interview by Trump's lawyer to protect Trump from the fallout about the Epstein files. What this really is nothing but a sketchy PR stunt by the Department of Justice. And we have seen this movie before. The Maxwell interview is to the Epstein files what the Barr letter was to the Mueller investigation.
If that were true, then Paris Hilton wasn't just a random guest in the wrong place at the wrong time. She may have been part of a system designed to lure the next wave of victims, all while the same old names watched from a distance. We cannot ignore that the names circling this story overlap with political royalty. Donald Trump, once photographed beside both Epstein and Hilton, now appears in newly released correspondence described as selectively redacted. Epstein's 2011 email to Ghislaine Maxwell, calling Trump the dog that hasn't barked, suggests he was waiting for Trump to either defend him or distance himself. That single line has reignited every rumor about what Trump knew, when he knew it, and why he is still urging Congress to release the files. Insiders say the administration's mixed messaging, first denying any connection, then demanding full transparency, looks like a preemptive strike against whatever might still be hidden in those pages. And standing in the middle of it all is Paris Hilton's image once again captured next to both men at that 2000 fashion event, a moment that now feels like the opening scene of a much darker movie.
And the big picture is, we don't normally look in prosecutors' files if there's not a trial. You know, we kind of let the evidence play out after an indictment. We see what happens at a trial. Here we've got this kind of bizarro world, I think maybe fueled by special counsels where they write reports, where everyone feels like we're entitled because we care so much about Jeffrey Epstein to look at all the evidence and find out if there's other names.
Critics argue that Hilton's recent attempts to reclaim her narrative, her confessions about trauma, her rebrand as an advocate, may also be her most strategic defense. Industry veterans whisper that she is fighting not just for reputation, but for survival in a media ecosystem that thrives on selective memory. Former assistants claim that the second wave of Epstein's operation was less about exploitation and more about influence, training celebrities to normalize his presence among the elite. If that's accurate, Hilton's transformation from naive socialite to global brand may have been shaped inside the very machinery Epstein helped construct. The irony is impossible to miss. The same charisma that made her a household name may have been cultivated in circles fueled by manipulation. Behind that transformation, new whispers emerge about a network still protecting its own. In sealed testimony reviewed by House staffers, two assistants describe recruits turned recruiters. While no names are visible, the timeframe mirrors Hilton's early 2000s fame. This is where the story stops feeling like gossip and starts resembling a blueprint. Epstein's circle didn't just chase fame, they weaponized it. They allegedly used stars like Paris as symbols of safety, baiting newcomers into the fold. According to one former security consultant, it was showbiz on the surface and strategy underneath. If that's true, those words confirm the theory that Epstein's gatherings weren't random indulgences, but carefully staged auditions for loyalty and leverage. Digging deeper, insiders believe Paris's alleged shift from Epstein's so-called party favor to rumored facilitator wasn't simple opportunism. It was survival.
No, bro, if you wanted to get someone, you have a high-profile witness, okay? High-profile witness in the craziest trafficking conspiracy of all time, where a guy who may or may not have been an intelligence asset or an intelligence agent or whatever it was, for whatever country, this guy he's arrested for trafficking to elites, and then you put him in jail.
Oh my God.
With that.
The trauma to power patterns seen throughout Epstein's orbit is chillingly familiar. The wounded learning to mimic their captors, building a facade of control to hide a history they never escaped. Psychologists who study grooming dynamics say victims often re-enter similar environments to reclaim the narrative, convincing themselves they're no longer powerless. That interpretation reframes Hilton's transformation from shy debutante to commanding social empire as something darker than ambition, an adaptation born of necessity, where control became its own shield. But behind that psychological layer lies another storm, the substances and coping habits that fans say once blurred her reality. Former associates point to the early 2000s, a period marked by chaotic parties and fractured memories when Hilton's public persona hardened into caricature. The conversation now is that what once looked like reckless fun may have been self-medication, a numbing edge to deeper wounds carved by an elite world that feeds on pain. If those theories hold, the scandal is no longer just about what Paris did or didn't do, it's about how power recycles trauma, turning survivors into performers inside the same gilded trap.
I want to know how Epstein made the money that he did. I want to know what the transactions are he was involved in. And that should all be something that the Treasury Department, the FBI can get access to, because in the meantime, what we're left with is Ghislaine Maxwell effectively downplaying this whole thing. Yeah, he was he hid it from everybody. Nobody else was involved. There's no proof of anything else. There's no blackmail. There's no foreign intelligence.
And just when it seems we've seen the worst, whispers surface about unreleased tapes said to contain conversations and private footage too explosive to make public. Insiders claim these recordings could confirm the unthinkable, that Paris Hilton knew more than she has ever admitted, or that she herself was secretly recorded, a pawn trapped inside Epstein's vault of leverage. The rumor splits opinion. Some believe she could be the key witness capable of detonating the empire's final secrets, while others suspect she is the next major cover-up waiting to unfold. Either way, those alleged tapes hang over the story like a loaded silence, daring someone to break it. Even the role of trauma has become its own narrative thread.
There's too much circumstantial evidence that leads me to believe that it was an assassination. You know, I know a lot of people think that he committed, a lot of very smart people that I know think he committed. I'm like, there's too many convenient things. The cut wires, the security cameras rather, not working. They weren't cut, right? They just stopped. They didn't function. Security cameras didn't function. The fact that he had shared a cell with this giant
Psychologists analyzing Hilton's behavior note that patterns of silence, deflection, and exaggerated confidence often track with survivors who never fully escape their abusers. But in the court of public opinion, that nuance collapses. Fans see contradictions, tearful interviews one week, nightclub appearances the next, and begin wondering which version of Paris is real. Insiders close to her brand insist she's being scapegoated by people desperate to divert attention from others whose names carry far more weight in Washington and Hollywood. Yet the question persists. If she were merely collateral, why do the files keep placing her near the center of the web? Epstein's emails reveal his fascination with media manipulation, discussing in one exchange how the right star can buy silence faster than any lawyer. Analysts believe that philosophy shaped his approach to celebrity friendships, explaining why his orbit included both disgraced financiers and tabloid icons. If that theory holds, Hilton's proximity wasn't accidental, it was tactical. Epstein understood culture, put a famous face in the frame, and the public's curiosity shifts away from the real story. But as investigators sift through more than 20,000 pages of correspondence, the illusion unravels. The same people who helped engineer the distraction are now the ones denying they ever played a role. Meanwhile, political shockwaves are building.
I think because this is a big problem. I mean, related back to what we were talking about earlier with Hollywood too, is that I think a lot of these don't respect the public. They don't respect our intelligence. You know, like I think the average American is smart enough to know the difference between somebody that was just in there or somebody that testified than somebody that was banging.
Congress is days away from voting on whether to unseal every remaining Epstein document, and pressure is mounting from both sides. House Speaker Mike Johnson publicly supports full transparency, while several senators warn that releasing names without context could destabilize institutions. Translation: too many powerful people have too much to lose. Behind closed doors, insiders say lobbyists tied to former Epstein clients are quietly working to limit what becomes public. One name reportedly resurfacing in those negotiations, a major celebrity witness, described as both victim and connector. Speculation again points toward Hilton. Her presence intersects nearly every crossroads of this saga. The fashion show photo, the alleged recruitment conversation, the island footage. The timeline doesn't prove guilt, but it sketches the outline of someone who's seen more than she'll ever publicly admit. As fans dissect every clip and resurfaced image, new theories emerge. Some argue she holds the key to the missing client list. Others insist she's being sacrificed to protect the truly untouchable. Whatever the truth, Paris Hilton has become the prism through which the entire Epstein narrative now refracts. But here's the twist almost no one anticipated. Sources claim the leaks may not be random at all. Congressional aides familiar with the data drop say the files were selectively edited before reaching journalists. Missing timestamps, blurred faces in some copies, but visible in others. That pattern suggests intention. Who benefits from Paris taking the heat right now? If these documents were leaked by insiders aligned with political factions, then the Hilton connection may be a distraction. One more glamorous shield for the men who still control the narrative. And so we're left with a story that's equal parts tragedy, manipulation, and showmanship.
See, the thing is, the average American probably can tell the difference, but there are sub-average individuals that all they want to know is you're on the list, and they hear you're on the list, and they might try. And that is...
Paris Hilton stands accused by whispers, defended by headlines, and haunted by images that may or may not reveal the truth. Jeffrey Epstein's empire may have crumbled, but the echoes of its machinery still shape how we see our idols today. Every time a new email drops, another name shakes loose. Every time a new clip surfaces, we glimpse one more shadow behind the curtain. As these leaks continue, one question refuses to fade. If Paris was more than just a guest, what other icons are hiding in Epstein's shadows? Will the next revelation finally crack the code? Or will power players bury it forever before we ever see the full picture? Until the next drop hits, keep your eyes open and your instincts sharp. We're not done yet.